Hello there. Indonesia is famous for its beautiful culture, its fantastic landscapes and islands, and its amazing food, along with just a bunch of other stuff. But one island within the nation of Indonesia that I think doesn't get enough love is the island of Flores. And as much as I love this particular island, it's also kind of understandable that it sometimes gets not the attention we could say that it deserves. It's the last major island in the chain of islands that makes up Indonesia. I've even heard some describe it and a neighboring island as the wild frontier of the nation. And it is a beautiful, though in some ways and places, still uncharted territory. The island itself is long and narrow and is extremely mountainous, especially on the lower portion of the island. And there are several active and some currently dormant volcanoes scattered all throughout. And because of all these challenges and also the dense jungle and in places savanna too that makes up this whole island, the center of Flores has been largely unexplored. The rivers that run through most parts of this area of the island are mostly unnavigated. Oh, and just as one final challenge, you may have heard of these guys before, I take it? Komodo dragons? Well, they get their name from the Komodo Island right next door to this one. And frankly, that's not the only place where they live. They are also very much at home here on Flores. So just in case you get the urge to go and explore this last wild frontier of Indonesia, just be easy. Though honestly, I can't blame anyone for. I wish I could go explore this place. That there's so much here that's undiscovered and we don't know about. But in recent years, some intrepid researchers have made some incredible discoveries about our human past on the island of Flores. Because despite all the inherent dangers that are here, and the even greater ones that would have existed in ancient times and prehistoric days, humans have lived on the island of Flores for an incredibly long time, with the first trace of Homo sapiens arriving on the island around 46,000 years ago. But the thing is, we're not here today to talk really about Homo sapiens. We're here to talk about something and a group of someones much more interesting to me. Because in 2003, a multinational team exploring a place called Liang Bua Cave made a discovery that would change our knowledge of our past forever. They discovered this, and not just this. In fact, they discovered the remains of the bones of at least 13 individuals, and these individuals were not Homo sapiens. And the first tell that gave them away was the size of their bones. These ancient hominids were absolutely tiny, and while they would eventually be dubbed Homo Floresiensis after the island on which they were found, they quickly got the public designation of the hobbit, because these ancient people only are estimated to have reached around 1.05 meters, and their brains were also understandably small compared to ours, only about 1/3 of the size. But despite the smallness of their overall skull, they had comparatively huge teeth, as well as no chins, receding foreheads, slumped forward shoulders, and yet extremely large feet for their short body size. All of this was completely unlike anything ever seen in any other ancient hominin species, and kind of understandably given the uniqueness of it and the kind of mix and match of different types of body parts. All of this just led the scientific community and the general public at large to both, well, A, become completely enraptured with our new friend, and B, for a whole bunch of theories to start to develop as to, well, how did they get here? How did they end up so different looking from any other ancient hominin that we know of? And what more was hiding out there in the wilds of Indonesia? Well, in recent years, there has been a lot of work done, a lot of study, and also a completely new hominin discovery from quite a ways away that shows that our Floresiensis may not have been as unique as I just made him sound. But we'll get into all that. We'll cover what we know of this prehistoric friend of ours from ancient Indonesia. We'll cover what we know of when and how they lived. And we'll also look at some of the amazing theories being put forth and the studies being done in recent years that have revealed new clues as to how the hobbit got here, and also what made them who they were. Before we get into any of that, and before we jump right in, I have to stop myself. I always get so carried away and say, first, hello. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to Lost Bits, the place where we look at unusual and mysterious parts from our past together. I am your host, I am Marie, and I'm so excited to share with you a little bit of the story of Homo Floresiensis, who's definitely one of my favorite tiny ancient friends. And this has been kind of consuming my brain for a little while now, I'm not gonna lie. This is going to be fascinating, you guys, and we've never gone to Indonesia. We've never talked about this species before. I think this is actually the first time we've talked about an ancient hominid species that's not Neanderthal. Well, it's time to branch out a little bit, I'd say. It's time to broaden our horizons. Need to get out there and get ourselves some ancient Indonesian lost hominin bits. Wow. We're gonna feel right intrepid after this one. Okay, let's start out by taking a quick look at the fossils we have so far. As of now, over 100 different fossil remains have been found, comprising those 13 individuals I told you about, all from Liangbua Cave. Also, I would like to take this opportunity to stop and say, guys, my only languages are English and a little bit of messed up Canadian French. I apologize if I'm messing up any of the pronunciations here. Now, of the 13 individuals recovered, the most complete total skeleton for one person we have is from this one I actually showed you before. This is a female, and it's believed that she died around the age of 30. And while there was a bit of discrepancy when they were first discovered of dating, because they originally thought these fossils were much, much newer than they actually were, some even going as recent as 18,000 years ago. More recent efforts in radiocarbon dating have shown that most likely the hobbit of Flores died off on the island around 50,000 years ago, which I mean is still incredibly recent. But I think it's a good idea to talk about these sort of changes in dating because, again, these fossils were only first discovered and the species as a whole was only first found in 2003. But we still have already had, a tremendous amount of discovery and work done. I think it's actually a good sign that, there's been some changes and retootling with the dating. It shows that people are really investigating this heavily. Likewise, there was initially some thought that maybe this ancient hominin species used fire, which would have been incredible because there were some burnt remains found in this same cave. However, further study has shown that Homo sapiens later lived in this cave too, and the charcoal samples taken ended up dating to the time of human inhabitation of the cave, unfortunately. And most archaeologists now feel it's extremely unlikely that our ancient friend here had fire capacity. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be impressed with them still. And you'll notice that final date of around 50,000 years ago is only a couple thousand years before humans, modern Homo sapiens, would show up on Flores. Because of all this, if you look online, there have actually been, people say that they've caught sightings of the hobbit or different mysterious humanoid creatures in the wilds of Indonesia since then. It's become kind of, I don't want to say conspiracy theory because I don't really feel like there's anything, I don't feel like there's any accusation of deliberate subterfuge here. Just some people seem to kind of wonder or think or maybe just hope that the hobbit could still be out there somewhere. And I mean, I get it. And I know I just said too about this part of Indonesia being mostly unexplored. I do want to say that is changing though as we get into more modern times. And we have no evidence of that. As much as I would love it, listen, if the hobbit still lived, I would be the first one out there, okay? I would be protecting our good friend Flo with my life, okay? That would make me so happy. That would make me so happy. But there's just been no evidence of that. And in fact, that 50,000 year cutoff mark I gave you, we haven't even found fossils that new yet. They're basing that off of tools that they found that date to around that time from Floresiensis. But I mean, there is a little wiggle room there. It's certainly possible they could have existed for a while beyond that date. Maybe some ancient Homo sapiens did meet them. But we'll have to wait and see what they figure out from further study in the coming years. I mean, finding newer fossils certainly hasn't been ruled out. And I do think it's interesting that their die-off point is around the time that Homo sapiens were just arriving on the island. We don't know for sure either why, as of now, Floresiensis went extinct. But now I think it would be kind of fun to just look at, how did these ancient people live? Especially, being so small in an island with some very, very real, big dangers to it. Oh my goodness. And by the way, can I just say, I know I just said that they had very much smaller brains than ours, but I'm not one of those people that necessarily equates brain size with brain strength. I think we sometimes put too much weight into just size. And I'm sorry, considering how stupid some of us modern Homo sapiens act with our nature, and specifically this type of nature, the fact that they were able to survive at all around Komodo dragons for as long as they did, we have to give them some intelligence cred here, I feel. Just deep down in my bones, I feel that. And actually, let's go back here a second, because I just mentioned to you, they did have tools. Archaeologists have found many stone tools that seem to belong to this ancient hominin. And in fact, one's even older. Like I told you, Homo sapiens first arrived on the island around 46,000 years ago. Well, the earliest evidence of any kind of people arriving on this island is over 1 million years old. And this evidence, too, was stone tools. How did they get here so fast? And I will say they have found, too, ancient hominin remains that aren't quite our Homo Floresiensis, that are spectacularly older than 50, 60,000 years old. And this other, even more archaic hominin species that they're still trying to figure out too, like they found a jawbone not in Liangbua Cave but nearby that's believed to be 700,000 years old. Meanwhile, I should say the earliest evidence for our hobbit friend is around 150,000 years ago. So was our friend Flo descended from these? Well, almost certainly yes. But then that just raises the further question of, well, where did these guys come from? We don't really know for sure. They haven't been able to sequence any DNA yet from any of these remains. And going back now to Floresiensis, by looking at their bones themselves, we are sort of able to piece together an idea of what their life would have looked like, maybe shedding some light on who they may have been related to. Toothware and other indicators suggest that their diet consisted of both plants and uncooked meat. Because again, we don't think they actually had use of fire. But what's interesting is the type of meat they seem to have been eating, because brace yourselves, people. Yeah, remember how I said I couldn't imagine like how smart they must be to live around these guys? They were eating those. They were eating Komodo dragons. Like, we don't know if it was like a scavenge situation or hunting, but they have found butchered Komodo dragon remains in that cave. And also they found, which I have to admit, this gave me such a giddy rush, I can't even describe it. They found stegodon remains in that cave that seemed to have been the result, of eating as well. But stegodons, we have to talk about stegodons. This isn't human history, but they're just too cool. Honestly, thank you guys for allowing me a chance to talk about these, because we don't normally cover animals here. I'm sorry, I have to. Thank you. Because I'm going to try to say this very calmly and just be cool. But I can't, because stegodons were tiny dwarf elephants. They were tiny dwarf elephants. They were little tiny dwarf elephants. Okay, they were still elephants. They were not little tiny. And I should say, not all stegodons were small at all. Ours were, as an example of island dwarfism. But there are many that were quite large, like this one that I showed you before. But honestly, they sound absolutely incredible, and the two smallest variants on our island actually would have been the most numerous throughout its history. The hobbit would have also had to compete with giant ancient storks, and just a whole host of other things. They also found less badass meat remains in the cave too, like rodents and things. I mean, all of this is just pointing to a very fascinating and possibly kind of fraught picture of what their day-to-day life must have looked like. But I mean, again, they were on this island for an incredibly long time. But how did they even get here in the first place? There's no evidence that any ancient hominin species had seafaring ability. And while you may have heard the myth that chimps can't swim, which is false. They can, it's just it's much harder for them and they don't like it very much. But even though that's not true, I will say we have no evidence that our good friend Old Flo here knew how to swim. And all this is important because, again, this is happening on an island. No one's proposing that this species just evolved on its own on Flores. The actual mainland where other species would have come from is hundreds of kilometers away. This has led some to suggest that maybe their ancient ancestors may have accidentally ended up on Flores due to the result of a natural disaster. And to get an idea of how this could happen, you only have to think, unfortunately, of the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami that struck here and other neighboring nations. It was a devastating tragedy, and still the worst natural disaster in Indonesia's history, often referred to as the Boxing Day tsunami. When this tsunami struck, after the water hit and then receded, the force of that water pulling back into the ocean took thousands of people out with it. But not all of them died. Some people survived by floating on debris for over a week, drifting over 150 kilometers out to sea from their home. So bearing all that in mind, you can easily see how if a tsunami struck in prehistoric days, an ancient hominin could well find themselves dragged out to a new island that they'd never been before. But there's still kind of people that argue this theory, and honestly, I get it. None of this is set in stone. Not even how our mysterious friend here got to be so short. It's easy to just assume island dwarfism again, but frankly, we don't know. And there are some that have argued back and forth, well, maybe they're already on the shorter side before they got here, from living on another island nearby, or just through their own genetic traits? Or is this an example of them living just on Flores for so long that they got this way? And who is the hobbit even related to? Is this a descendant of the ancient Homo erectus that somehow washed up here, like during a tsunami? Is this a whole new ancient hominin lineage that we have never discovered before? Because again, until we get some DNA sequenced, we really don't know. There have been people throw ideas this way and that. There's some that feel really, really strongly this is a descendant of Homo erectus. There's some that will argue you to the death that it is otherwise. There's some that even have gone in completely other direction and argued that these are a type of small, isolated Denisovans. But again, this is all just coming back to the fact that, we can't sequence Homo Flo's DNA, so we just don't know who they descended from. But I will say the general consensus is now, it seems like, that most likely Flo descended from a different species than Homo erectus, because there doesn't seem to be a tight relation to them. But we'll come back to that a little bit more later. I will say, though, there's been another discovery in the Philippines in recent years that has added to the chaos a little bit, if I may say it so bluntly. In 2007, or only 3 years after our friend Flo was found, researchers working in a cave there found ancient hominin remains on the island of Luzon. These remains not only date to around the same time period as the hobbit, but they bear some striking similarities physically to our species as well. Both were incredibly short. Both had smaller brains than us and had some archaic features, but they're not completely the same. And frankly, if you know your geography, you know that our island of Flores is almost 3,000 kilometers away from the island of Luzon where this new species was found. And one of the differences that's so fascinating about this other hominin, which eventually would be dubbed Homo Luzonensis after its island, was that they found it had curved toe and finger bones, suggesting that it was still doing more climbing maybe than walking. But the thing is, we found way fewer fossils so far of Luzonensis than we have of the hobbit. So far, only 13 little individual bone fragments have been found of Luzonensis, coming from, they think, at least 2 adults and 1 juvenile. So even though we know enough about them to know that they were different from the hobbit, we don't know really as much what they looked like or what their life was like. And while initial excavations and archaeologists thought that these fossils date to around the same time period as our hobbit friend, again, archaeological retootling is a thing. They now date the remains that they found on Luzon to around 160,000 years ago, which means they do line up with roughly around when Floresiensis was just getting started, at least as we know of, in the form we know it in on Flores. But still, it's not clear if these two species were related or not related at all. There's a lot of differences here. Some have argued that it's way too much of a coincidence to see 2 tiny hominin species, both island dwellers, living around the same time period, and have argued that means there must be a genetic connection. Again, others argue heavily no. There's no evidence of that, and that is true. However, in an intriguing kind of twist, some researchers seem to think very strongly that the different, almost more archaic features we see on Luzonensis harken back to the days of the Australopithecines, which is a big ancient hominin throwback, a huge one, suggesting that Luzonensis may be descended from them. Though not everyone agrees with this. In a recent study in 2023, researchers looking at the remains of both Luzonensis and our hobbit Floresiensis have announced that they feel strongly that neither of these species, at the very least, are descended from Homo erectus, the way so many others keep claiming. But does that mean the answer is going all the way back to Australopithecus? Or is there other stuff that we're just still missing? And honestly, guys, we're probably going to have to stop there for today, because we just about hit the limit of everyone's knowledge now. But just the idea that there were, These are both such new species. We're discovering new relatives in our family tree, which I guess brings me to our last point. Are we directly descended from the hobbit or from Lusinensis? No, but they are our relatives, and the idea that we have had these super cool family members that we just didn't know about until what, like until around 20 years ago, or in the case of Lusinensis, even less. My goodness, I'm kind of chomping at the bit a little bit because I wish we knew more, but what an exciting time we find ourselves in. I have no doubt that we're going to be hearing a lot more about both of these species in the future. What do you guys think? What are your thoughts? Do you think there could be even more ancient hominin species in Southeast Asia? What do you make of the idea of Lusinensis and Floresiensis either being related or not? Do you think they could come from a species as far back as Australopithecus? Gosh, even as I say the name Australopithecus, it just puts this image in my head of just like the dawn of time, you know? That's so ancient. But there's just so much left to figure out about our family tree. It's just absolutely captivating. Let me know what you're thinking. Like I said, I am going to stop there for today, guys, and thank you so much for joining me for the story of Homo Floresiensis, an ancient tiny friend with a big impact. And I hope that you enjoyed it. Like I hinted at earlier, if you find yourself particularly interested in our topic today, then please don't let my words be the last words you hear on any ancient hominin species. Just like always, you'll find a full source list pinned to the top comment below, but please don't stop there. And may I say your local library might have an awesome book on Indonesia or ancient hominins or anything that we talked about today, and you won't know until you go and take a look. Wander on down the library, see what they got. You'll never know until you try, and I guarantee you, they will have your back. You go on down to the library, go on down there and get yourself something cool about history. Get something cool about history and then come on back and let me know how you made out. And once you're back from the library, if you enjoyed what you saw today and you'd like to, then consider checking out the rest of my channel. You'll find lots more unusual and mysterious tales from our past. I upload new videos every week, so hopefully you'll find something there that you like so I can see you again soon. But either way, thank you again so much for being here today. Be safe, be happy, go with all my love. Until next time, goodbye.